There are two major events that are connected to the Renaissance. The first is the fall of the Roman Empire, and the second is the bubonic plague. The Roman Empire had been the champions of knowledge and the holders of such knowledge from the Greeks and other classical periods. When the Roman Empire fell, a lot of this knowledge was lost or was held by the Ottomans. The bubonic plague swept across all of Europe, not discriminating between the rich or the poor. With so many people dying and so many members of families dying, people had no choice but to be faced with the concept of death daily. This would go on to affect many Renaissance ideas. The Italian Renaissance started in Florence, Italy in the early 1400s. Due to the trade through the Mediterranean Sea from the Ottoman Empire and other countries, a vast amount of wealth and knowledge, ideas, and some of the classical literature that had once been guarded by the Roman Empire came into Italian ports. Italian artists like Raphael, Michelangelo, and Leonardo da Vinci moved away from the flat, traditional perspective of medieval art, initially taking on some of the Christian themes, but moving towards a more human-centered style with more depth, perspective, and color. With the rediscovery of Roman building techniques, such as the use of columns, arches, and domes, many wealthy patrons started to commission architects like Botticelli to make great works of art that were architectural feats that were focused more on aesthetics rather than practical use. No longer content with the beliefs of the church, many Renaissance thinkers began to experiment for themselves, preferring to use logic and ration rather than traditionally held beliefs. Many of these scientific experiments brought about newfound technologies and amazing innovations. Explorers like Christopher Columbus took to the seas during the Renaissance. They looked to increase trade, improve knowledge, and connect the world together. It didn't take long for them to realize that the world as they knew it was much larger than they had thought, and this brought about the discovery of the New World. Armed with better telescopes and a thirst for knowledge, Renaissance scientists looked to the skies to challenge traditionally held beliefs. Astronomers like Copernicus successfully were able to prove that the Earth revolved around the Sun, rather than the other way, that the sun had revolved around the earth, as the church had said. Many advances in medical thought were made when scientists started to perform dissections on corpses during the Renaissance. Unfortunately, due to the fact that obtaining and dissecting corpses was usually illegal, a lot of the corpses were obtained illegally and through grave robbers. The Renaissance also gave birth to a revival of philosophical ideas from great Greeks like Aristotle and Plato. Renaissance thinkers read the original text rather than commentaries due to the importance of reading primary sources, and began to build new ideas based around the human ideal. Although there was a revival of reading texts such as Greek philosophical works in the original Greek, there also was a revolution that was occurring where literature was being printed in the vernacular, that is, the language of the local people in the town, so more people were able to read than ever before. The printing revolution was due in large part to the Gutenberg printing press. Before, many of the books had to be handmade, a process which took a very long time and was not cheap to produce. However, the printing press made it very easy for many copies to be made very quickly and be readily available. Political thinkers like Machiavelli used logic and rationale to analyze the role of the individual in the government. As they began to formulate new ideas, in many ways they began to lay the groundwork for the Enlightenment and many of the ideas that were used in the American Revolution. Renaissance thinkers believed that individuals should spend their whole lives building their physical and intellectual capabilities so that they would be ready, willing, and able to perform well under any circumstance. Perhaps there is no better example of somebody who performed this ideal than Leonardo da Vinci. The Christian Church had been the most powerful institution in Europe in the Middle Ages. However, people began to grow frustrated, first with the amount of wealth that the church had gathered together while so many others had been poor, and second, with the inability of the church to help people during the Black Plague. Christian Renaissance thinkers like Erasmus, seen here writing his Folly of Man, tried to use the ideas of humanism and the Renaissance to try to reform the church and restore it to its former glory and place of prestige among the people. As the Renaissance moved into the northern part of Europe under what was known as the Northern Renaissance, the distinct differences in regions became manifest in the way that Dutch painters began to focus first on religious life and then in daily life, and came about with interesting styles as seen here by Bosch. In England, playwrights and poets like Shakespeare began to rise to the forefront of culture as the theatrical arts began to round into form in England. Other literary works also began to gain popularity and are still seen as classic literature used in classrooms and colleges today. Due to the fact that it is both a European and Asian country, the Renaissance affected Russia differently than it did its European counterparts. Its traditional and orthodox beliefs continued to be shown in their art, their fashion, and many other aspects of their life, even as they were influenced by the ideas of the Renaissance. The Renaissance had many lasting impacts, including but not limited to the great works of art that are still being admired today. However, it was immediately felt in the wake of the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation, where religious ideas and reforming the church would lead to bloodshed and much conflict throughout all of Europe.